This podcast is made possible by Planful.
Hi, this is Howard Wilson, CFO of PagerDuty, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader.
This is episode 849.
Yeah, I think a CFO from outside would be surprised at the complexity of a university. When you think about it, essentially we're running a city, right? We have those 20,000 students who are the citizens, right? We've got about 8,000 employees that are helping to run the city. We house people, we feed people, we have to provide utilities for them. It's a complex organization. Absolutely. Everything that you can think about in your hometown, all of that really is replicated on a university campus.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Brett Powell, CFO of Baylor University. We sat down with Brett last month in person at Oracle's Cloud World in Las Vegas. When Brett Powell is asked what distinguishes his day-to-day role as a finance leader inside the world of academia from the day-to-day of his CFO peers residing within industry, Powell, without hesitation, tells us complexity. Not to mention a varied group of stakeholders, including students, employees, board members, and let's not forget, donors. What's more, Powell tells us, very often universities have a organizational mindset when it comes to cost allocation and subsidization. What happens when one department subsidizes another, and another, and another? Brett Powell discusses that and much more on today's episode. We begin after this. With so much change around us and your need for increasing agility, you have to equip your team to win, and you have to do it now. Join over 1,300 companies of all sizes using Planful to help plan and execute with greater confidence. Planful integrates your critical financial processes to serve the data you need, insights you demand, and the answers necessary to manage your business optimally. Planful lets you plan better, close faster, and report more accurately. And Planful's not just for finance and accounting. It's for the entire business to plan, collaborate, and drive increased financial performance. Take full control of how you administer and manage all of your financial processes and data. And put finance first collaboration at the heart of every decision. When finance is a team sport, you can be a champion. With Planful, you'll be a champion of finance. Get in the game by going to planful.com to learn more. Hello, we're speaking with Brett Powell, CFO of Baylor University. Brett, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Brett, we always begin with this question. We ask our guests to look back and try to identify some of those experiences they feel prepared them for a finance leadership role. What would come to mind for you?
Yeah, there's a few things. So let me just start with the beginning of my career. I started in public accounting 100 years ago. Been in the business world a long time. So, after 10 years or so of the typical travel around the world doing audit engagements, I decided it was time to find another career direction. And I landed in higher education, mainly because I'd had some audit experience there, and it just seemed like a place where could make a difference in a finance role. So I got a first role in higher ed. And I decided pretty quickly that if I were going to make a career out of higher education, I needed to understand higher education, right? So you can't really speak intelligently to faculty on a campus without really understanding what do they do, right? What happens in the classroom? What happens in the research lab? What's going on with student life? The things that really impact the university, and of course, all of that flows into finance. It all has some impact on what we do in financial operations. So I just started immediately trying to really understand what was going on, and a couple of things that immediately come to mind. I remember going into a meeting one time. It was really sort of an open forum at the university I was at. It was an email that had been sent out to everybody on campus. We're going to be talking about first-year student retention and some of the factors that really play into that, and hoping we can really understand ways to improve on retention. So I went to that meeting. Of course, I'm in finance role. I have nothing to do with student retention. And I walked in there, and the person leading the forum was someone that I knew and greeted me, and there was a couple other people there. It was really not a very good turnout. So we talked for a minute, and he looked at me and said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, that's a very good question, because I want to understand. I want to know what you're doing to impact student retention, because every time you move retention one direction or the other, it has an impact on what I need to do in finance. So it all fits together, and I really want to understand your work." So I mean that's one example of how I've really tried to immerse myself in the work that I do. And it really, I have a doctorate in higher ed administration, and the only reason I did that was I saw it as an opportunity to really understand all of the components, everything that happens across higher ed. So, I mean, it just gave me this broad perspective of everything that I felt like I needed to really internalize to be able to lead a finance function at a university.
And along the way, you were at a number of different academic institutions before Baylor. So you climbed much the same way someone does in business. You got certain experience at one college or university, and you moved on to a more senior level at the next. Was it just that sort of ladder?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I started in public accounting, so I became a controller, but, that's the natural thing that you do. But, the more I got to understand the university and the more I got involved in things, people recognize that you have abilities beyond what you're doing. And so, you get more and more responsibility, and more responsibility leads to opportunities. There just aren't many times throughout my career that I could point back to and say, I really sought out another opportunity there. They really were just opportunities that came along. As people recognize that you can do more than you are. You hear from people, right?
The example you shared with us I found interesting, because we spent a lot of time talking about customer retention, customer attrition. First year student turnover would be one metric that perhaps you do watch closely now. And in fact, when you showed up at that meeting, maybe you thought this is worth finding out more about.
Absolutely. We really don't say customer on campus. That's one of the words that you just don't use in an academic setting. Profit is another one. Although, if we don't turn a profit, then we don't operate the next year. But yeah, absolutely. Students are the customer of the university, and the better you can understand the customer, the better you can serve them. So in most cases, people looking from the outside of an institution in, what they really focus on is what's your total enrollment, right? It seems to be an important number, and in some cases that's really not what's most important. We're at Baylor, we are intentionally at the level of enrollment we want to be. We're about 20,000 students, and that's where we should be. That's what fits our institution. And others might look at that and say, well, why aren't you growing your enrollment? And the answer is because we don't want to. But those are the students that we think we can serve best, which means that we can put our resources into those students, and we can graduate more of them. We can help them along their way in building out a research profile, whatever it is that students are there to gain through their academic experience. we feel like we can serve them best at that size. So, I mean, there are metrics you can look at related to how well are we serving those students, and retention's one of those. You can look at things outside of the classroom. Are they developing in the ways that we want them to? So, the numbers are helpful, but students are more than numbers.
Tell us about Baylor. It's a great time to segue there. Baylor University, what sets it apart?
Yeah, so Baylor is an almost 200-year-old university, founded in 1845. Our main campus is in Waco, Texas. We've got sites, several other cities in Texas. But the thing that is unique about Baylor is we have had an unapologetic Christian mission from the founding of the institution, and that's true even today, almost 180 years later. And what that means is that when our faculty are working on research, they can do that from a Christian perspective. So if they're trying to solve some of the world's greatest problems, hunger, global flourishing, we're really trying to understand the world. They can do that through a Christian worldview, and that's what they bring to their research. And the same for how they approach teaching in the classroom, right? So that's part of what they want to instill in students is, you're going to be future business leaders or future PhDs yourself or engineers or whatever it is. And, having that Christian worldview is part of what you take into that role when you finish the work at Baylor. So to me, that is the primary distinctive that we have. It really is not true for many Christian universities that over the years have more or less abandoned that original mission, but it's held true for Baylor for all these years.
Organizationally, for our listeners who have built their careers in businesses, are there any key organizational differences within a university? And are most university organizations similar? I imagine there is a board. I imagine there are different stakeholders, though, perhaps, than a business might have.
Yeah, if you think about the governance structure of a university compared to a business, they are very different. So we do have a number of stakeholders that you wouldn't normally see in a corporation. So obviously it starts with a board, which we do have in common with for-profits. But then beyond that, every donor to the university sees themselves as a stakeholder, right? Because I gave you money for a specific purpose, and I have a vested interest in what happens with that. So all of those donors become part of the governance process. They're stakeholders. We receive a significant amount of external funding from federal, state government. They're stakeholders in the process because they want to know that when they give us funding for research, how we're going to use those funds. Is it really going to help them fulfill the purpose of the funding they provided to us? So they're part of the stakeholder group. It's just, and then you have the typical creditors or stakeholders and all the things that are in common, but it's really the source of funding that creates the differences in how we function as a university compared to a corporate, right? So corporation, you're selling a product, and once the sale is complete, you might have an ongoing relationship with the customer, but they don't really have much say in how you operate as a company. Our stakeholders all feel like they have some some role in the university, some perspective on what we do in the future.
Just thinking of your work week, how it might be different from a commercial CFO who resides in a commercial organization. You spend your time differently, perhaps. What would the differences be, though? Where do you find a good portion of your work week dedicated to that perhaps your CFO peer from business wouldn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess really the difference is, corporations have different business lines that they focus on, and the same is true for us. But the business lines for us can be as minor as a $10,000 grant to do one specific project, right? Where you wouldn't see that level of detail in a corporate world. So it's the it's the number of providers of services at the university that creates the complexity. So, we've got something like 20 administrative and academic units across the university. Within those 20 units, they're divided up into departments, and then departments are divided into programs, and programs are divided into faculty. And every one of those has a little bit different focus in what they're doing, which means they have a little bit different need for information to support their work. So it creates more detail than what you would typically see in a finance role at a corporation, where you're really at the corporate level, and again, thinking about business units, but certainly not as divided as what we are.
So what would be your metrics that you're looking at regularly?
Yeah, I think the primary one that really drives everything that we do right now is it relates to where we're trying to get to as an institution. So our primary objective currently across the university is to become one of the leading research institutions in the U.S. And we're well on our way toward that. Have made significant progress in the last 5 years. Actually, we've grown our research activity by over 150% in the last 5 years, right? So, but that gets us part of the way toward where we're trying to get to, which means that we've got to continue to devote resources toward that growth. And so monitoring both the output of that is research activity growing, but also the inputs is really what drives a lot of the metrics. Are we devoting the right level of resources that are going to help us to continue that trajectory that we're seeing currently? Resources,
including the outreach to receive that funding, to tap those sources of funding?
Absolutely. So that means resources being the faculty who have the connections to those sponsors, who have the money to do the research. It means attracting the right students who can work alongside those faculty to conduct the research. It means building the infrastructure in our research area so that they can both help faculty prepare grant proposals to receive funding, and then monitor those on the back end, so the next time we seek an award from a sponsor that we have a good reputation for providing the right information that they need to track the awards that they give us. So it's broad. I mean, when you think about building out a research profile, you would think that all that means is we need to have the lab space to do the research, but it's so much broader than that. It really touches everything across the university, and means that we have to have that mindset in all of our resource decisions. Does this support our goal to reach that research level?
With that growth in R&D and the funding behind it, do you find yourself educating all of the stakeholders you mentioned earlier about how these different R&D projects are scaling? Or, I mean, is that a role that you would play, or is it something that the department does? Do they educate the board? Do they educate the individuals who are stakeholders as well?
Yeah, so external stakeholders, that would really be more the role of the research office, the board, the faculty themselves. So my role in that is really more internal to the university, to make sure that individuals across the university have an understanding of what that means for us. So that means we have to make sure that we've got the right tools to get where we need to be, that we've got the right people, and we're doing the right things. The thing that I like to say related to this, and I probably repeat it on a weekly basis, is, do we have the right people doing the right things the right way? And if we get all of that right, then that allows our faculty and students really to focus on the things that are going to help build that research profile. So, the things that we're doing that directly relate to that, this goes back probably 5 years when this effort really got started, was recognizing where we don't have the right tools to support the faculty in this work. So one of the things that we did, a little over 2 years ago, we went live on Oracle Cloud, finance, and HR, because what we discovered was we had systems and processes in place that were built for the university that we were, not the university that we want to be, right? So the only way to get there is to have the tools in place that are going to allow us to focus on making the right decisions, right? So and Oracle Cloud has been a big part of that, because it gives us the analytics, the insights, the automation in some of our accounting processes that allow us to move past really being transactional. I'm referring just to our work in finance, as it relates to this. So, the less time we can spend on transactions, the more time we can spend on really being advisors to the campus to help them understand what the numbers are telling us, where they may be off track in their own resource allocation decisions. We want to make sure that we're providing the right level of information to the right people at the right time, and using the tools that we have to do that.
Has the management system that you just described, does it allow you to educate the organization? I think you used the term advise them, by making certain numbers visible to them more on a regular basis. I mean, is there part of the university that perhaps hadn't been paying close attention to certain metrics or numbers, and your team and you were able to sort of raise the profile of something across the organization?
Yeah, that's a great example. So what we like to say is we went from a data desert to a data tsunami, right? So the changes that we've made, with Oracle at the base of that, we really previously were just sending out basic reports. Here's what you spent last month, and all focused on previous, right? This is what happened, and not really focused on what does the data tell us about what's going to happen. Now with us being able to change our focus and really be more future forward thinking, and more again advisory, we can help those units understand, here's what the data tell us, right? If you want to get to X, you're not going to be able to get there based on what we see so far. So some changes are going to be necessary, and that's really been the shift that has been important.
I'm always looking for, is there some dynamic that you began to measure that hadn't been measured before? With the systems you now have in place, you're able to measure things. Was there a business dynamic or something that a member of your team, or perhaps you, began to understand more about and realize this is something that we have to discuss at the next meeting, this is something we need to put on our dashboard, or we should give, take greater care to discuss more often? Don't know. Anything like that you could share with us?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind immediately is it's really about how our people spend their time. So universities we're a people organization, right? 75-80% of our expenses relate to salaries and benefits of our employees. So if we don't understand how those costs are being used, then we really can't drive any change. That's an area that we're really trying to pay attention to, primarily because faculty at a university have a number of different priorities that they're trying to fulfill, right? They teach, and most of our faculty are both teaching and research faculty. Some of them are solely research, some of them solely teach, but those that have multiple responsibilities, the better we can understand where they're spending their time and what that means in terms of the costs that come out of that, the better we can use that data to understand, are we allocating our time right, which means we're allocating our expenses right, to really drive that increase in research activity.
It's interesting. We've been talking to finance leaders about that theme, news topic, the Great Resignation. And we've kind of moved into this, the other theme that's popped up lately, quiet quitting. Are there different variations of this coming out of the pandemic? And it might be interesting to start there. Do you have a new mindset in terms of the talent and those professors you were just mentioning and research people? Is there a new mindset in some way as to how we'd like to have them work, whether it's remote or
presence here? Anything you can share with us or tell us?
Yeah, it really is more related to the staff side of the university, not so much the faculty. Now, on the faculty side, we're bringing in additional researchers that, they have a higher profile. But on the staff side, it really has changed the type of person that we're looking for. Even just within my area in finance, the accountant that we hire today is not the same accountant that we would have hired 10 years ago. Right, it's not can you record a journal entry correctly. It's can you look at this data and tell me what it says. Right, it's less transactional and more analytical. A great example of this is in our payroll team. Again, back to this shift that we made a couple of years ago to Oracle. Our payroll function is completely different today than what it was 2.5 years ago before we made that change. And we knew this was coming, and we tried to get the right people in that area and make sure that they understood how their role was going to be changing. But that it wasn't a reality until they actually had to do it. And what I'm referring to is they're more analysts, right? They're trying to understand the data that they're looking at as they're processing a payroll. Does this make sense? Should that person have a 10% higher gross salary than they had last pay period? And if not, what happened? Right? It's those types of things that they're looking at. It's not did I enter the salary correctly anymore? It's more about what's the data telling me about what I'm seeing as I'm going through this process. And that's the same for our accountants, for analysts, everybody across the university. It's just a different skill level and a different way of thinking about the work that we do.
You mentioned how Baylor is really advancing into a real research university position with that funding. Is its student body changed as well? I mean, if 10 years ago was it the student body was largely from Texas, and here today it's more diverse, or how would you say statewide?
Yeah, we have definitely changed the reach of the university, and it really did start about 10 years ago, as you said. So if you go back 10 years, probably 60 to 70% of the student population was from Texas. Today, that number is more like 40%. We have students from every state in the country and about 100 countries around the world. So just the demographics of the students have changed. The way we reach students have changed. We've grown from a couple of hundred students in online programs to over 5,000 students who are online today. So the student shift has been as dramatic as the research
What
shift.
is when it comes to that online virtual student, is there a philosophy there? Is there a type of program that's dedicated virtually, whereas others are on campus? I don't know.
It's a great question. So those online programs are really geared toward working professionals, so they're professional programs. So it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, individuals who are already working in a profession but need an advanced degree really to continue in their progression in their career. So that's really the focus in those, and that's where all that growth has occurred.
One would imagine the pandemic certainly might have helped drive the adoption of some of those programs.
Yeah. Actually, the pandemic didn't really have an impact on those online programs. That trajectory was already underway, and the growth just continued. It's really been exponential over the last 10 years. So during the pandemic, of course, every university was affected in essentially the same way. Every student became an online student for some period of time. Now that was shorter for us than for many. So, we sent every student home for that semester from March of 2020 through May, and then slowly brought students back beginning that fall. So. Had a short-term impact, but really hasn't changed any of the philosophy, the thinking about programs.
We touched on this earlier, but I think I'll run it by you once more. As you compare notes with your CFO peers from the commercial world, I'm wondering what surprises them when you share something about your work week or something relative to how you operate, what is it that surprised them? Are they really? Is that how it works? Is there something, or do they sometimes seem naive about all of what the role entails at a university?
Yeah, I think a CFO from outside of higher ed would be surprised at the complexity of a university. When you think about it, essentially we're running a city, right? We have those 20,000 students who are the citizens, right? We've got about 8,000 employees that are helping to run the city. We house people, we feed people, we have to provide utilities for them. It's a complex organization.
Security.
Absolutely. Everything that you can think about in your hometown, all of that really is replicated on a university campus, which, it certainly adds to the complexity of the things that we need to do in finance to make sure that all of that is under consideration when a change is made, right? So if you think about something as simple as we're growing the research profile, which means that we need more research space. So are we building additional buildings to do that? And if so, do we need to borrow the funding to do that? Or are there university resources that we can use? If we are using resources, how does that affect our liquidity? And does that have any impact on our bond rating? So simple decisions like we want more research space will domino through many decisions that have to be made to bring that about.
Excellent. Great perspective for us. Thank you for that. We are up to our finance strategic moment question, where we're just looking for one anecdote or moment of insight that you had along the way. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, the moment that really comes to mind immediately. I was a CFO at another institution. This is a number of years ago, and the university was really resource constrained, struggling with how really to accomplish what was needed to be done in a declining resource environment. So I started trying to develop a model to help us to really understand how can we move past this point and start to see some growth again, see some progress. So I built out this resource allocation model that it would seem second nature to someone in a for-profit corporation, where you look at each one of your products and try to understand the profitability of the product. And if we're losing money on one, does that make sense? And if it doesn't, you just end that product line, right, and move on to something else. You have winners and losers. You cut the losers and move on. But that's a different mindset in higher ed, right? We don't think about academic programs in the same way. So if you're building a model to look at those programs and you do have winners and losers, and we do. Higher ed is an interesting industry in that there is so much cross-subsidization that goes on. You have programs that lose money for years, and maybe you understand that, or maybe nobody's ever really paid attention to it. So there's subsidization that happens across programs, and it also happens across students. You have some students that pay more than others. So when you start digging into that and really understanding which programs are really providing the resources to keep all the other ones afloat, that's when people start to ask questions about, why do I not get more resources because I'm bringing in more revenue? So the moment for me was that data is helpful, right? You can look at individual programs and understand revenue and expenses, and even call that a profit margin and get away with it sometimes. We don't talk about profits much in higher ed. But then when you marry that data with mission and strategic direction, that's when it makes sense, right? If our strategic direction is we want to grow the business school, for example, and the business school is subsidizing every other program, we may need to cut those subsidies back and let them grow. And what that leads to is that the first response from every other program is going to be, wait a minute, why does my program suffer to allow them to grow? But in some cases, you have short-term pain to lead to long-term gain, right? If that business school is generating so much profit that it can subsidize everything else, if we allow it to grow, think about how the subsidy can grow, and if that program wins, all other programs win too. So it's you have to help people understand the interaction among those programs. Just putting the data in front of them is not enough, right? And that's the strategic moment for me, is to help people put that into perspective. The data say one thing. The strategic direction that we're trying to get to helps you really put the data in perspective, and now we can make some decisions.
He was really a one-of-a-kind consultant inside the realm of corporate finance. There wasn't anyone else like Steve. There wasn't anyone, I think, driving change to the degree Steve was able to help organizations begin to advance into the future. He was a visionary. He really was. And those people who work closely with him know that. So we were lucky to have him join us for the 16 episodes he participated with us. And I'll be in his debt always for that. Now we'll return with Brett Powell of Baylor University.
We're going to move to what we refer to as our mentoring round, where we'll ask you several questions intended to inspire and inform future finance leaders. We'd like you to think back to the first time you stepped into a CFO role, where you were the top finance executive. And if you could go back in time and just maybe give yourself a piece of advice, if you think back to that first 60 days that you took on that leadership position, what is it that you would tell yourself?
You can't change everything at once, right? No matter how much you want to tackle every project in the first 60 days, you just can't do it. You have to prioritize, decide which ones are going to have the greatest impact, tackle those first. It may mean you have to let some things go that you really need to get done, but greater impact immediately gives you better long-term results than really trying to put a little bit of effort into everything, focusing your effort in one area, seeing that result, seeing that impact, and then move on to the next. Looking back at when I started in a CFO role, that's basically where I was. There's all this that needs to be done, and really trying to run from thing to thing and accomplish everything at the same time, and it's just not possible.
We like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us, and we're wondering if you have a personal habit or part of the daily routine that you're known for, and we're looking for something maybe broader than the professional realm. Might be something a family member would point out to us. This is what Brett does. He does it every day, or he does it every week. Don't know. But is there a personal habit or part of a routine that you're known for? People point out. There's one thing that people comment on pretty regularly. I start my day early. I get up at about 4:30, and I'm sitting in front of my computer at home at 5 a.m. So I've got a good 3 hours that I can get some things done where there's nobody else that's gonna bother me and impact my being able to focus on some things. So that means that 5:30, 6 a.m. I'm sending people emails of things that we need to get accomplished, and so I get these regular comments about, do you ever sleep? I get emails from you pretty much 24 hours a day. I do sleep, but that's been impactful for me. It doesn't work for everybody, not everybody's a morning person, but it's helpful to me to have some focused time where I know I can think without interruption. Our final question is where we ask you to look forward finally, and we'd like to know about the next 12 months. What are your priorities for the coming 12 months as a CFO? What would those be?
Yeah, I want us our finance team, to really focus on what we can stop doing. And by that I mean, how do we allow, again, back to, I mentioned Oracle Cloud a couple of times earlier, there are some amazing tools in that system that will automate some of the things that we're trying to do manually. How do we allow the system to work for us so we can stop doing some things and we can really focus on adding value to our partners across the university? What will allow us to fulfill that advisory role that I spoke about earlier in a meaningful way, so that we're seeing the insights that maybe they don't have time to get to, and we can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm seeing this trend that you probably need to pay attention to. To me, that's the greatest thing that we can do in the next 12 months, is really to focus on what are the things that we're doing that don't add value, so that we can really turn our attention to adding value across the university.
Brett Powell, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you allowing me to come and talk to you.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.